Merci tout le monde. Je vais commencer avec quelques questions pour vous autres. La France fait face aux effets mondiaux et aux tarifs. Pourquoi la France n'est pas en récession? Le Royaume-Uni fait face aux tarifs et aux effets économiques mondiaux. Pourquoi le Royaume-Uni n'est pas en récession? L'Allemagne et l'Italie font face aux effets mondiaux et aux tarifs. Pourquoi ne sont-ils pas en récession? Les États-Unis, évidemment, font face aux tarifs et aux effets mondiaux. Pourquoi qu'eux autres ne sont pas en récession? Là, le Japon fait face aux effets mondiaux, aux tarifs. Le Japon n'est pas en récession. Donc, pourquoi le Canada, après un an de M. Carney, est le seul pays dans le G7 qui est en récession? Pourquoi? Si c'est vraiment les effets mondiaux, les autres pays auraient eu la même récession, mais c'est seulement le Canada qui a contracté 2 trimestres, l'un après l'autre, la définition, elle, d'une récession. Et où est M. Carney? Ça fait maintenant 4 jours depuis qu'on a appris que le Canada est le seul pays en récession. Il n'a pas pris une seule question pour expliquer pourquoi il a créé une récession. Il vous a banni, les médias, de même poser des questions quand il était avec le ministre des Affaires étrangères de la Chine. Pendant la fin de semaine, pendant tout le vendredi, il n'a pas pris une seule question. Aujourd'hui, il se cache encore. Oui, il va y avoir une photo-op. Il va mettre un casque. Il va prendre un martel. Il va prétendre de bâtir une maison. Il s'attend à ce que vous autres mettez une image de lui à la télé pour montrer qu'il était devant un chantier. Mais il ne va pas répondre aux questions sur la récession libérale. Ce n'est pas du leadership. M. Carney a besoin de répondre comment, après qu'il a promis d'avoir l'économie la plus forte dans le G7, on a maintenant l'économie avec la seule récession dans le G7. Et on a appris que les commentateurs et les économistes libéraux ont dit que c'est juste une récession technique. Oui, c'est vrai que l'économie a contracté 2 trimestres l'un après l'autre, mais regardons les autres données. OK, regardons les autres données. Commençons avec les emplois. Il y a eu 112 000 emplois perdus dans 3 mois cette année. Depuis que M. Carney est devenu premier ministre, il y a 45 000 plus de Canadiens au chômage. On a le 2e pire chômage dans le G7, 1 tiers plus élevé qu'aux États-Unis. L'économie s'est contractée au cours de 3 des 4 trimestres depuis que M. Carney est devenu le premier ministre. C'est la seule économie de G7 qui a eu cet effet. En effet, notre PIB aujourd'hui, c'est plus petit que quand M. Carney est devenu premier ministre. Juste pour être clair, le PIB du Canada était plus élevé le dernier jour de Justin Trudeau que c'est aujourd'hui. On a maintenant plus de 20 milliards de dollars nets d'investissement qui a quitté notre pays. Pour 5 trimestres consécutifs, le montant d'investissement dans notre économie a réduit. Equifax a signalé la semaine dernière que le nombre de cas d'insolvabilité a atteint un niveau jamais vu depuis 2009 et le nombre de personnes qui ont manqué un paiement, c'est 1,5 million de Canadiens depuis 3 mois. Une augmentation de défauts de paiement hypothécaire a augmenté de 32 % dans seulement une année et le Canada a le pire taux d'endettement dans le G7. Aujourd'hui, on a un rapport des banques alimentaires Canada qui montre encore que les Canadiens doivent faire recours aux banques alimentaires pour pouvoir manger. Mais quelle insulte aux Canadiens que les libéraux disent que c'est juste une technicalité. La mère monoparentale M. Carney, qu'est-ce que vous allez dire à elle quand elle doit remettre de nourriture à l'épicerie parce qu'elle ne peut pas payer le prix? Est-ce que vous allez dire que sa faim est juste une technicalité? Est-ce que, M. Carney, vous allez dire au monsieur qui doit retourner à la maison pour dire à ses enfants qu'il n'a plus d'emploi que c'est juste technique? Est-ce que vous allez dire, M. Carney, que le jeune couple qui ne peut pas acheter une maison malgré le fait qu'il travaille sans arrêt, que c'est juste technique? Non, c'est vrai. C'est la vraie vie des Canadiens après 1 an de votre leadership, après 10 ans des libéraux. C'est pour ça que nous revendiquons un débat d'urgence pour renverser les politiques libérales qui ont causé la seule récession dans le G7, pour proposer des solutions, l'élimination des lois anti-développement, couper le coût exorbitant de ce gouvernement, réduire les taxes sur la construction de logements, sur le travail, sur l'investissement et sur l'énergie, libérer notre économie en enlevant le paperasse. C'est comme ça qu'on peut convertir la récession libérale en croissance canadienne. C'est comme ça qu'on va rendre notre économie abordable chez nous, forte chez nous et sécuritaire chez nous. Thank you very much for being here, everybody. Now in English. France is facing tariffs and global economic uncertainty. France is not in a recession. The United Kingdom is facing tariffs and the global energy price increase, and the United Kingdom is not in recession. Germany and Italy are facing global economic effects and tariffs. They're not in recession. Japan is facing tariffs and the global economic economy. Japan is not in recession. The United States is obviously facing tariffs and global economic factors like high energy prices, and the United States is not in recession. So why is it that only Canada, after a year of Mark Carney, is in a recession today? Well, you could ask him that question, but he won't take any of your questions. He's hiding from you. It was Friday morning that we learned that Canada's economy was the only one in a recession, the only G7 economy. And what has Mark Carney done since? He's been in hiding. Oh, yes, he let you in for 30 seconds to have a little picture of him with the Chinese foreign minister. Then he hid for the rest of the weekend. Today, he's going to let you show up and take a picture of him wearing a hard hat and carrying a hammer around, pretending he's a carpenter. But he won't have time to take questions on how he created the only recession in the G7. Question period, where normally prime ministers go to answer, especially in a moment of crisis, when the economy has fallen into the only recession in the G7. You would expect him to be there, to be accountable, to show his incredible economic brilliance, but he's not showing up for question period either. While Canadians are starving, losing their jobs, and missing mortgage payments, and Mark Carney has created the only G7 economy in a recession, he is hiding from accountability. Now, Liberals are saying it's only a technicality. Sure, it meets the back-to-back declining GDP, quarter after quarter definition that you find in any textbook, but that's just an economic fluke. Look at the other data. So let's do that. Let's start with jobs. In the first 3 months of this year alone, under Mark Carney, Canada's lost 112,000 jobs. There are 45,000 more unemployed Canadians than there were when Mark Carney became Prime Minister. We have the second highest unemployment in the G7, a third higher than in the U.S. Let's move from there to business investment. Remember all the investment Mark Carney was going to bring us? For 5 consecutive quarters, investment has declined in Canada. There's $20 billion in net investment that has left since he took office. In fact, there's been, when it comes to investment, we have the worst investment per capita of any country in the G7 under his leadership. And by the way, that stacks on top of the $1 trillion of net investment that had already left in the prior 10 years of the Liberal government. And that investment then flows into people's ability to pay their bills. So let's look at that. Equifax put out a data last week showing that insolvency rates have now reached their highest level since 2009, up 19% year over year under Carney. 1.5 million Canadians missed a minimum debt payment in the first 3 months of this year. Mortgage delinquency rates are up a third in 1 year, and Canada under Carney has the worst household debt of any country in the G7. Just today, the Food Bank's Canada report came out showing, and I'm quoting, something fundamental has shifted in Canada. 1/4 of people are food insecure. That's 1 in 4 people who struggle to access the food they need to be at their best. This sharp rise in food insecurity is not a surprise to the Food Bank network, which has seen demand increase year over year, with visits doubling across Canada since 2020. A country cannot be strong and resilient when so many people are struggling to pay their essentials. Too many people have incomes that do not meet the cost of living. For one thing, a job is no longer enough to ensure a reliable pathway to stability. Keeping up with rising food costs has become more difficult, even for those who are employed, who now make up 1 in 5 food bank clients. 4 in 10 Canadians are now spending more than 30% of their income on housing, and that number is the threshold to determine that they cannot afford the homes in which they live. The share of people reporting difficulty in accessing care rose steadily from 19% in 2023 to 24% in 2026. So Mr. Carney says we're not in a real recession. He sent out his Liberal commentators and economists to say it's just a technicality. Mr. Carney, I have a question for you, and I hope that you'll have the courage to actually look Canadians in the eyes today and be accountable for your recession. The single mother who has to turn back items at the grocery checkout because she can't afford to pay for them, are you going to tell her that her hunger is just a technicality? Are you going to say to the man who goes home to his kids in Windsor tonight to say that he's lost his job and they're going to have to sell the home, that's only technical? Are you going to tell that young couple that work every day but still can't move out of that 400 square foot apartment that their inability to own a home is just technical? Or are you going to own up for the recession that you created and get into the House of Commons and do your job to reverse the Liberal policies that have made us the only economy with a recession in the G7? We as Conservatives are here to work. We have a plan to reverse the Liberal recession, get rid of the anti-development laws, cut the red tape to unlock our businesses so that they can grow higher and pay more wages, cut the bureaucracy, the consultants, the foreign aid, the handouts to phony refugees, the corporate welfare to Liberal insiders, close the tax loopholes that Mark Carney uses to avoid paying his taxes so that we can reduce them for everyone. Use that money to bring down inflationary deficits, taxes. Let's cut taxes on work, investment, savings, home building, and energy so that we can unlock our economy and be the fastest growing in the G7. That is how we're going to make Canada affordable at home, secure at home, and strong at home. Thank you.
On combating anti-Semitism, what would you like to hear from the Prime Minister this evening?
He should start with a big apology. We've seen, after a decade of Liberal government, a nearly 200% increase in hate crimes. The Liberal Party is set to divide Canadians one against the other. They have let in terrorists and anti-Semites through our policy of open borders. Their soft on crime policies allow violent anti-Semites to be released back onto the streets to terrorize Jewish communities. And then Liberals have stoked this anti-Semitism by saying one thing in a synagogue and then saying exactly the opposite in a mosque to divide the communities against each other. Mark Carney should lay out an apology to the Jewish community for the violence, the terror, and the fear that his party and his government have allowed to happen over the last decade. We need to secure our borders against immigration, against illegal immigration, against allowing terrorists into this country. We need to deport visitors who are participating in these acts of terror and violence on our streets. We need the government to condemn anti-Semitism in all of its forms, and we need to bring in real tough new laws that lock up violent criminals who target Jews and others. Oh, by the way, I should also add, we should get rid of the 700 IRGC officials that Global News says are in Canada, because much of the anti-Semitism is being fomented by Iranian government officials that are dividing our communities and acting dangerously on our streets. Mark Carney's government has only deported one IRGC official, even though we know there are at least 700 here. He should do his job, get CBSA, the RCMP, and the other law enforcement to kick these terrorists out of our country.
Is anti-Zionism a form of anti-Semitism, sir? Just a follow-up on anti-Semitism. Is anti-Zionism inherently anti-Semitic?
Well, I think some of the rhetoric that Liberals have used on that subject has stoked division and has led to some of the violence that we have seen on our streets. So I would encourage Liberals to stop the divisive rhetoric and work on uniting Canadians. I know the Liberal Party survives and thrives on divide and conquer politics. That's not what we need. We need to unite Canadians around our values of freedom, of acceptance, and of treating everybody with respect.
Madame... Monsieur Poilievre, est-ce que le gouvernement agit trop tard sur le front de l'antisémitisme?
Monsieur Carney devrait commencer en s'excusant pour son parti qui a permis à l'antisémitisme d'élargir. Les politiques libéraux ont divisé un groupe contre l'autre. Leur politique d'immigration massive sans contrôle qui permet des terroristes, des criminels, des antisémites de venir au Canada a contribué à la violence. On a vu une augmentation dans les crimes liés à la haine, a augmenté de plus de 100%. Et moi, je pense que M. Carney devrait s'excuser au nom de son parti pour avoir causé ce phénomène. On doit renverser la politique, devrait renforcer nos frontières, empêcher des terroristes et des antisémites de venir au Canada, mettre des criminels en prison en éliminant les lois libérales et expulser les membres de l'accord islamique de l'Iran, dont il y a 700 ici au Canada, qui provoquent la violence contre les Juifs et des gens perses ici au Canada. On devrait rétablir les valeurs canadiennes, ce qui permettent la tolérance et la liberté pour tous les groupes.
What do you think? What would the impact on Alberta be if the province decides to separate?
Well, it would be bad for both Alberta and Canada, and it really makes me reflect on the fact that 10 years ago, under the Conservative government of which I was a part, support for separation was zero. In fact, there have only been 3 referendums to separate from Canada, and they've all happened under Liberal governments. When Conservatives are in power, we unite the country. In fact, even in Quebec, 10 years ago under Stephen Harper, the separatist movement was wiped out. Le Parti Québécois and the Bloc Québécois were on their last leg. But 10 years of divide and conquer, centralist Liberal government that seeks to control everything in Ottawa has reignited those divisions. And Mr. Carney's got to start to take responsibility. He's the Prime Minister. It's his job to unite the country, not to wag his fingers, but to actually bring people together and explain how he's going to make Albertans, Quebecers, and all Canadians fully united in this country.
Trip to the United States have 3 rounds of trade talks set. They've wrapped up the first one. What do you think about where Canada is? And if you were Prime Minister, what specifically would you do on that file?
Well, where is Mark Carney on trade with the U.S.? Nobody knows. I mean, and depends what time of day you ask. I mean, one day he says he wants a full and complete rupture with the United States. The next day he says he wants to make America, in his words, great again. So which is it? He says one day that he thinks integration has made us subservient, and then another he says he wants more integration. Mark Carney's been hiding from the negotiating table for the last 6 months while the Mexicans have been eating our lunch. As Mr. Carney likes to say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And right now, because Carney's been hiding from the negotiating table, he's made all of us on the menu while Mexico and the United States advance their interests at our expense. Frankly, I'm the only leader who actually has published a plan to deal with the Canada-U.S. renegotiations. I've said we need to build up our leverage, which includes our natural resources of oil and minerals, create a national reserve of those minerals, and then tell the Americans that they could potentially have privileged access to buy those minerals in times of need in exchange for tariff-free access to their markets. My mission will be a tariff-free trade arrangement, tariff-free on autos, aluminum, steel, lumber, and everything else, reciprocal free trade, using our resources as leverage in order to get that. And that is what we need to get to do right now because the Mexicans are eating our lunch.
Est-ce que vous pensez que c'est grâce à vous que M. Carney fait une annonce pour annoncer des mesures au sujet de l'antisémitisme ce soir? Est-ce que c'est grâce à vous, votre pression?
Probablement. J'ai mis beaucoup de pression pour défendre la communauté juive depuis longtemps. En même temps, on n'a pas besoin des annonces et des discours. Je sais que M. Carney aime ça, donner des discours. On a besoin des résultats. On a besoin des synagogues qui ne sont pas ciblées par des tirs de fusil et les feux. On a besoin d'un Canada où les Juifs peuvent fièrement montrer leur foi et leur tradition sans crainte. C'est le résultat dont on a besoin, pas des annonces et pas encore un autre discours de Mark Carney.
AI investment in infrastructure development has been credited with keeping the U.S. economy out of a recession. The government's AI strategy is expected to come out this week. Do you think Canada needs to focus more on attracting AI investment and infrastructure development to try to achieve similar results for our economy?
Well, I think Mark Carney and the Liberals need to get out of the way. What will bring the AI infrastructure? Affordable energy. If you do, for example, a ChatGPT search, it consumes about 9 times more electricity than a Google search. These massive data centers require enormous amounts of energy, which means that we have to expand natural gas, nuclear, and hydroelectricity. What's standing in the way of that? The answer is a costly liberal regulatory regime that blocks things from getting built. We need to repeal C-69, get rid of the industrial carbon tax so that we can power the future of data centers and compute and become a superpower in both resources and AI.
What do you make of Carolyn Finlay's victory in BC, and what does it mean for your federal party and BC politics in the future?
Well, I congratulated Leader Finlay on her victory. I want to thank her for her very public and consistent support of me and my leadership over many years, something she did emphasize during her leadership race. And I think that what British Columbians want from her leadership is what she ran on and what Canada needs. We need an affordable British Columbia with safe streets, where the economy is self-reliant. We need to lock up criminals, cut back on the cost of government, reduce deficits, ban drugs, support parental rights, all things that Caroline Finlay ran on, and I hope that she succeeds.
How are you on the economy? For the USMCA July 1st review, and what's your expectation out of Dominic LeBlanc, who is headed to Washington this week?
Well, I've already told you how we're preparing. We published a very clear plan to get a tariff-free agreement. I've already did an extensive tour of the United States to win support for tariff-free trade. Frankly, I've done a lot more in opposition than Mr. Carney's been doing in government to promote tariff-free trade. I don't have any expectations for Dominic LeBlanc's trip. He does these trips where he goes and socializes and comes back empty-handed. Yet while the Mexicans have been in formal talks for 6 months, Mark Carney has been gallivanting around giving speeches filled with dazzling buzzwords that achieve nothing but the worst economy in the G7. Unfortunately, right now, all we have is a gigantic liberal recession here at home and no tariff-free access abroad.
Sir, on the economy, can I ask you, on your position on the economy, the polls show that despite your bleak picture that you're painting, Canadians trust Mark Carney to deal with the economy, to address jobs. So why do you think that is? Why do you think that despite what you're saying, your pitch is not resonating with them?
Well, it is, and I think what's going to happen is the illusion of Mark Carney is very quickly going to collide with the reality of Mark Carney. And that reality is that he is the only G7 leader who has put his economy into a recession. He's the only G7 leader whose economy has shrunk in 3 of the last 4 quarters. He's the only G7 leader whose economy is smaller today than it was a year ago. He leads the economy with the worst household debt, the worst housing costs, and the worst food price inflation. That is the real record of Mark Carney. It is not the illusion presented in the media, but it is the reality. And I think in the long-term run, reality will collide with the illusion. One last question. By the way, you're all shouting at me. Wait a sec here. You're all, whoa, wait. You're all shouting at me. How many questions have I taken? Is anybody keeping count? Can somebody know? Oh, wait a sec here. How many questions? We're saying 8. If I could, I just want to point things out. 8 questions, which is 8 questions more than Mark Carney has taken. Sorry, go ahead.
NDP leader Avi Lewis made the call on Friday for Canada to send a humanitarian export of oil to Cuba. What do you make of that call and the situation in Cuba?
Well, our oil is for sale on the international market. We expect to be paid for it. We're not donating our oil to a communist regime. So,
should we buy all 88 of the F-35s, or should we split the contract?
Once again, I think we need to stop the political theater, and the Prime Minister needs to get down to the negotiating table, get a tariff-free deal, get it done, because we've lost 112,000 jobs in the first 3 months of this year. We had the only G7 economy in recession. It's time to put the illusions aside and get some results. Thank you.